Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, things adjacent. Yeah, I know the banner's all off to the side. I'm just trying to be artistic about my space, just, uh, you know, slowly kind of figuring out where everything's going to go. I was going to actually reposition everything and reconfigure everything eventually, but um, anyways, I'm going to go with this for just a while. You can actually see the bear in the Black Bear News, kind of the whole thing. My head's not in front of it. So lots to cover. As usual, I'm doing a late upload tonight. Just my schedule is all over the place. The next couple of days are probably going to be sketchy for me actually doing any videos, but we'll see how it goes. As usual, lots and lots and lots to cover, but I had some good comments that I wanted to read. First of all, from Jane, and Jane was replying to a comment from Marty. Marty had a good comment talking about talking to people about the reality of what's going on. Before I read this comment, let me just clear up. I was talking about telling the truth and knowing the truth or relaying the truth to people. Please understand that I understand, like, the truth is outside of me. That the truth is always outside of us, though it can be inside of us. But if you can't verify it somewhere, obviously, you just don't make up the truth in your head. I don't make up the truth in my head. I actually try to remove myself as much as possible, my own leanings or beliefs or whatever. But when you hear the truth, when I hear the truth, when I see the truth, there is definitely a vibration, definitely an alignment. It rings true for me. So just to clarify. So Jane says, on one level, I agree with your post, Marty. I have no time for delusion. I do not believe in gods, magic, Santa Claus, or the Easter Bunny. I am an atheist, and I have no time for rulers. However, maybe it is not quite so black and white. No one owns the truth. Well, not in the sense that they can impose it on others. I think of religious people in particular who insist they know what is true and insist on imposing their religion's laws and beliefs on non-believers. They are out of order. And if people don't want to know about climate change, that is their right. Maybe they do know, but just want to talk about it. Just don't want to talk about it in that moment. Or maybe they are in the first stage of acceptance, which is denial. Those people are entitled to process it in their own way, not because someone insists they immediately get with the program. Some people cannot handle it emotionally because to speak about it causes immense grief and they are already on the edge. Maybe they have young children and their hearts are breaking. Maybe they do talk about it, but only with a select few. Maybe some people are so overworked they don't have time to pay attention. And then there are those people who will never understand it. Maybe they are not too bright. Maybe they were denied education. There are a lot of people who have no natural curiosity in science or facts. Or maybe they come from abusive families. And going against the status quo generates too much fear. The doctor cancer analogy does not work. Doctors are approached and consulted. Only if we are being asked for our opinion do we have the right to express it. Random doctors don't insist they examine you to listen to their diagnosis. That would get them disbarred and or charged with assault. I understand your frustration, but only engage with those that want to, and leave others to work it out for themselves. Either way, extinction is coming, so maybe let go of the outcome and practice compassion towards this weird mob called humans. Peace, fellow traveler. I just really like that comment. I wanted to read it. I hope you all enjoy it. I don't know. The doctor cancer analogy, what if you go in for a routine checkup and the doctor's like, oh, we found, what if you're not looking for cancer at all, something else. And then the doctor says, oh, by the way, you've got this huge lump in your back or your stomach or your lungs or whatever. In that case, you're not looking, you're not expecting anything like that. You're just, it's kind of, but anyways, maybe that wasn't a good analogy at all. I'm going to move on. I want to read a comment from Henry Holt. My daughter 10, my son 8. The kids get taught at school about climate change by their teacher. They also follow Greta online at school. My son has logged into BBN a few times and read some comments without my consent. Grr, uh-oh. My daughter has actually watched. My daughter's all excited about the fact that I have a YouTube channel, and she's like, I watched your show. I was like, is she understanding what's I'm talking about? I don't know. But the kids never seem to talk to me about climate change. I suppose I do not broach the topic of climate change. The way I see it, kids just love outdoors, running on the beaches, the wildlife, playing with their friends, guinea pigs, I would just prefer to let them be kids. I won't instigate a conversation with them unless I'm asked. Most people that I know in my direct world and engage with understand climate change and the predicament we are in. I regularly have this discussion with my associates, longtime employee, my longtime contractor, my wife, my mother, my stepfather, marine biologist, scientist, the guy I share my workshop with, and the sculptor who has the workshop just up from ours. All my musician friends are hip to this. Most of the people in the Surfboard Riders Club and the local gallery, if I went to our local market on Saturday, I could have this conversation with most people I know, and the list goes on. However, I never broach the topic while doing business with the client or a stranger that I do not know. I never even bring it up unless they do. Then I tread lightly. But my observation is people know we are on thin ice more and more. This year has been the hottest on record in Australia, and we are heading into a major downturn. And house prices are plummeting. People know this stuff more than they speak of. Like, I spent the other day putting a new roof on my shed with the local plumber, and while we were swinging tools, we got to talking. He was totally switched on, and we discussed all manner of these things. He even knew about the insects. I think people know more than we think they do. I just wanted to read that. I think that's very true. I think people do know more than we think they do. I don't know. I really feel like other countries, more people are hip to it. I'm just making wild assumptions, and so there's really no, not a lot of like hard science behind what I'm saying. But I just feel like in Europe, England, possibly Australia, New Zealand, I think people are. I just think people are more up on the science than they are in America. Lots of people in America know, or the U.S., should I say? But I feel like we're just way more in denial about it, and people are way more afraid to talk about it. We're not. What we're not talking about on social media is climate change here, anyways. It's not what I'm seeing. I see a few sprinkling of people. I follow climate change folks, and they're all talking about it, but those people are not they're not my people on my timeline. They're not my, friends, associates, family. Among those people, nope, nothing, nada, zilch. Not a lot of talk. It's very, very rare and random. It's funny. The other day I saw a tweet from somebody on my, and same with Twitter. Really, very, very sparse. Except for some of the pundits, some of the comedian, Lee Camp and Jimmy Dore, and now Tulsi Gabbard. It's funny because the politicians and the alternative political comedian pundits are the ones that are talking about climate change. But as far as like regular folks, people, just, regular old people, like nobody's talking about it. Nobody's really like having hard discussions about it. I just don't see it. And I saw a tweet anyways. I saw a tweet the other day from somebody saying like, they were referencing the Cohen testimony and the thing that happened with what's the guy's name, Matthews, whatever, the representative, who was saying like, don't you call me a racist. And the guy, the tweet was like, "This is why we can't have a conversation about racism in this country." And I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" That's all I see on social media is talking about racism, sexism, transphobia, like all day long. It's all day long, and it's wall to wall all day long. Like we're never not talking about racism. And I don't know. It's not that we don't talk about racism. It's that everybody spends all their time pointing it out, and nobody's really having a discussion about like, what are we going to do about it? Like, it's just a lot of like racist, sexist, sexist. Like, where's the conversation about where are we going to find the solution? Anyways, moving on from that. But what we're not talking about is climate change. Like, nobody's talking about climate change. And so it's interesting because, that's generally what I see most of the conversations in, on my timelines, is mostly like racism, sexism, and even, there's not a lot of people talking about, there's some income inequality and like capitalism being, a shitty way to live. And the fact that we're in economic disparity is out of control, but even that is muted, very, very muted compared to what, everything else that people are talking about. But I don't know. I don't see anybody talking about like, hey guys, you think we should be concerned about this extinction that's happening right now? Anybody? Nope, nothing. Just, observations, whatever. So this is just gonna try and read as much as I can in the time allotted that I allot myself. This is from the bigthink.com report. Just 23% of Earth's wilderness remains. 23%. So here's another frightening statistic. A new paper in Nature adds urgency to the fight against climate change. 77% of land, excluding Antarctica, and 87% of the ocean has been modified by the direct effects of human activity, states a new paper in Nature. Just 5 countries, Russia, Canada, Australia, the US, and Brazil, contain 70% of the world's wilderness, excluding Antarctica. The paper emphasizes the urgent need to protect large-scale ecosystems, calling them a buffer against the Anthropocene. Human exploration and activity has transformed the natural world. And a paper recently published in Nature gives us some numbers to accompany our sense of that ever snowballing change. The Wildlife Conservation Society summarizes it in a news release. 23% of the world's landmass can now be considered wilderness. The rest, excluding Antarctica, lost to the direct effects of human activities. The criteria by which the Nature paper examined Earth included a focus on built environments, crop and pasture lands, population density, nighttime lights, roadways, railways, and navigable waterways, and the scale of the details found using that criteria are shocking, as the authors, James E.M. Watson, James R. Allen, and colleagues write. Between 1993 and 2009, an area of terrestrial wilderness larger than India, staggering 3.3 million square kilometers, was lost to human settlement, farming, mining, and other pressures. In the ocean, areas that are free of industrial fishing, pollution, and shipping are almost completely confined to the polar regions. Such a large impact seems to be relegated to comparable few actors as well. 20 nations hold control over 94% of the marine and terrestrial Earth. 5 nations, Russia, Canada, Australia, and the US and Brazil, control 70%. If future generations are to remember us with gratitude rather than contempt, hardy har, we must leave them a glimpse of the world as it was in the beginning. That was a quote by Lyndon B. Johnson, and that was a long time ago. What action can be taken to protect global wilderness? We believe that the Earth's remaining wilderness can be protected only if its importance is recognized within international policy frameworks, the paper states. The author continues, how can changes in policy at the global level translate into effective national action? By our measure, 20 countries contain 94% of the world's remaining wilderness, excluding the high seas in Antarctica. More than 70% is in just 5 countries: Russia, Canada, Australia, and the United States and Brazil. See what's left. Thus, the steps these nations take or fail to take to limit the expansion of roads and shipping lanes and to rein in large-scale developments in mining, forestry, agriculture, aquaculture, and industrial fishing will be critical. How about those no-go zones, guys? The paper recommends a move for large-scale ecosystems to be explicitly protected by an international framework similar to the Paris Climate Agreement. Pressure could well be put on the 5 largest meat and dairy companies who emit a startling amount of CO2 and don't receive nearly as much political attention as oil companies. Global policy should also encourage rewilding, build more carbon capture sites, plant more trees, donate to organizations that plant more trees, reach out directly to Chinese provinces to assist in their energy production so that the relatively new spike in CO2 emissions drops. Quite relevant in this moment in America, just before the midterms. Oh, this is a little old. Vote for politicians and environmental issues that will make the world a better place. Make the world a better place, so let's start living. I was just being a little bit funny. This is we do need to make the world a better place. Like, pretty simple statement, pretty large task. Also from the very same site, bigthink.com. I actually got both of these articles from Nick Humphrey on ye old Facebook. Human-driven climate change meets gold standard of scientific certainty. New statistical analysis shows that human-driven climate change is a virtual certainty. We already knew this, but they're going to say it again for you. While it's difficult to find people who deny climate change is happening, difficult to find, some still argue that humans are not climate change's primary cause. That was hilarious. By applying peer-reviewed statistical methods to 40 years worth of satellite data, researchers have determined that the evidence of human-driven climate change has passed the gold standard of scientific certainty, the 5 sigma level. This threshold is used in particle physics to determine the existence of new particles. Now, it's being used to definitively state that humans are the cause of climate change. As if there were any reason to doubt the 97% of climate scientists who believe that climate change is driven by human activities, now more data has confirmed what we already know. The fact that the 5 most recent years have been the 5 warmest in 139 years, the fact that the global temperatures have risen by 0.8 C since 1880, I don't know about that figure, and the fact that the Arctic sea ice is decreasing by 12.8% per decade are definitively attributable. Sorry, I cannot say this word right now. Attributable to human-driven climate change. I got it that time. The new certainty comes from a recent article by Benjamin Santer of the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and colleagues. The article, published in Nature Climate Change, looked at 3 of the most relied on satellite data sets used to conduct climate science, specifically the Remote Sensing Systems, Center for Satellite Applications and Research, and the University of Alabama in Huntsville data sets. The researchers were looking through the data sets for a specific signal, that is the thumbprint of human-induced climate change, and the noise of the data, the general variance in the climate. They found that the likelihood that the current change in climate is derived from human activities has surpassed the gold standard of statistical significance, or the 5 sigma level. I read that before already. Rigorous statistics. For most, the fact that the researchers detected the fingerprint of human-driven climate change at the 5 sigma level probably means exactly nothing. Sigma refers to a standard deviation, a measurement of how spread out a value is from the mean or average, right? You have 1 standard deviation from the norm, 2, 3, 4, 5. Another way of thinking about it is that the sigma levels correspond to how likely it is that a given observation actually matches what one is looking for versus how likely it is that the observation has arisen from random chance. Generally, the 5 sigma level, or 5 standard deviations, is used in particle physics as the threshold before a discovery can be declared. Because many of the observations from particle physics can occur by chance, Rather than from, say, a newly discovered type of particle, physicists tend to set the bar high. When an observation meets the 5 sigma level, it means that only once out of 3.5 million times could the observation have occurred by chance. Only once out of 3.5 million times. This threshold was used to declare the discovery of the Higgs boson and the first detection of gravitational waves. Now, lead author Santer claims that the 3 biggest data sets on climate change show that human-driven climate change has reached the 5 sigma level. That is 1 in 3.5 million chance that our climate is changing because of some other reason other than human activities. Is it hold on, what is it? Is it grand solar minimum? Huh? Is that what it is? Is it the polar shift? I don't know why my dog is making so much noise. Is it natural? Is it a new ice age? Now, lead author Santer claims, and we already read this, the narrative out there that scientists don't know what the cause of climate change is wrong, said Santer in an interview with Reuters. We do. Yeah, anytime you hear that scientists aren't sure what's, yeah, I mean, they might not be sure about some specific occurrence, but the whole scientists aren't sure thing is got to stop when reference to climate change. And that's it. That's all I'm going to read of that. Moving on. So a lot of people were referencing this post by Sam Carana on Facebook. Even more startling. I think he was a new I guess projection, including the new cloud study, or the thing about the clouds disappearing. So this is titled "A Rise of 18C or 32.4 Fahrenheit by 2026." So this is, I think, up from, was it 10C by 2026? Am I right about that? I don't know. A catastrophe of unimaginable proportions is unfolding. Life is disappearing from Earth, and all life could be gone within 1 decade. Study after study is showing the size of the threat, yet many people seem out to hide what we're facing. In the Arctic alone, 4 tipping points look set to be crossed within a few years. Loss of Arctic sea ice's ability to act as a buffer to absorb incoming ocean heat. Loss of Arctic sea ice's ability to reflect sunlight back into space. Albedo, or albedo, as the English like to say, destabilization of sediments at the seafloor of the Arctic Ocean, and permafrost melt. Crossing these tipping points triggers a number of feedbacks that kick in at accelerating speed, including even more absorption of heat by the Arctic Ocean, further changes to the jet stream resulting in even more extreme weather, seafloor methane release, water vapor feedback, and emissions from land such as methane, nitrous oxide, nitrogen oxide. Due to permafrost melt, storms, and forest fires, temperatures also threaten to rise strongly over the next few years as sulfate cooling falls away. That's global dimming, while more black carbon and brown carbon gets emitted as more wood gets burned and more forest fires occur. A recent study points at yet another tipping point, i.e. the disappearance of marine stratus clouds, which could result in a global temperature rise of 8 degrees Celsius. So so I guess that's where he gets 18C, because it was a 10C prediction by 2026, and you just slap on the 8C and there you go. And the model used in the study, the tipping point starts to occur at 1,200 parts per million CO2, i.e. a stack of greenhouse gases, including, so that's a 1,200 equivalent of CO2, including methane, nitrous oxide, and nitrogen oxide, and changes in clouds resulted in global surface warming of 8C at 1,300 parts per million CO2. As stratocumulus decks did break up into cumulus clouds and evaporation strengthened, and average long wave cooling at the level of the cloud tops dropped to less than 10% of what it was in the presence of stratocumulus decks. The 8C rise would come on top of warming that would have already occurred due to other warming elements, resulting in a total rise of 18C from pre-industrial. Oh, that is hot. That is just so hot. What it would take to reach 1,200 parts per million CO2? The IPCC's AR4 contains a scenario of 1,200 parts per million reached within corresponding temperature rise of between 5C and 10C above pre-industrial. NOAA's figures for greenhouse gases add up to a current level of 500 parts per million CO2 equivalent. So basically, they're saying the CO2 right now, the measurement is around 411, but they're saying the equivalent of all the other gases in the air is equivalent to 500 parts per million. NOAA's figure for methane GWP is too low, especially when considering a rise within a decade. When using this 500 parts per million CO2 equivalent, it would take 700 parts per million to reach 1,200 parts per million. And if 1 parts per million equals 7.81 gigatons of CO2, then 700 parts per million equals 5,462 gigatons of CO2, which may seem a lot, but at a GWP for methane of 130 10-year horizon, it would be reached instantly with a burst of methane of some 42 gigatons, i.e. less than Natalia Shakova's warning that 50 gigatons of methane is ready for release at any time. And of course, there are further warming elements in addition to methane and CO2. As an earlier study points out, life on Earth will already have disappeared with a 5C rise. How precious life is. It took a long time for life to evolve on Earth. At first, hardly any species could live on land. There was no ozone layer to protect them from UV radiation. Also, there was no oxygen in the air to breathe. Life formed some 3 billion years ago, and bacteria first developed the ability to decompose carbon dioxide and produce oxygen some 2.3 billion years ago. Then worm-like creatures started to multiply strongly, using more and more oxygen and producing more and more carbon dioxide. Eventually, this resulted in a sharp fall in oxygen levels, leading to extinction of these species. This first mass extinction was followed by a spike in oxygen, as both the species in the oceans and plants on land continued to produce oxygen while these first animals went extinct. Temperature changes dominate in subsequent mass extinctions, and each time it took life a long time to recover. We've now entered the 6th mass extinction as oxygen levels are falling. Oceans are acidifying and species are going extinct at accelerating rates. A 2013 study calculated that species are facing warming that occurs 10,000 times faster than their natural ability to adapt. The speed at which temperatures and greenhouse gas levels are now jointly rising is so large and so unprecedented in Earth's history that many doubt that there will be any life left on Earth by 2026. How's that for depressing? It's hard for me to even, it's hard for me to even take in the Sam Carana posts or the Arctic News posts. I don't, possible, totally. After we lose all the sea ice in the Arctic, essentially, for the most part, the predictions are that all hell breaks loose or things fall apart very rapidly. We do not know. I have no idea. It's just so overwhelming that it's just so overwhelming that I just can't even wrap my mind around it. And it kind of puts me in a space of like, what are we going to do? I'm fully aware of what these predictions are. I'm fully aware of what the timelines are. I'm fully aware of, the probability that is the timeline. I guess I'm just going to operate on another timeline that, maybe we got 10 or 20 years. Maybe we got some time to work with. Until that window is obviously closed, and for the most part it is. I'm just gonna, I'm gonna operate that there's probably maybe a couple of timelines, but this is very, very probable, of course. It's just a lot to deal with emotionally. It's a lot to do, it's a lot to take in, and it'll definitely, for me anyways, it definitely puts me in the mind frame of, enjoy what you can, do what you can, enjoy the the 3 to 5 years or less that we possibly have of normalcy. I don't know. Who knows? It sounds really incredibly horrible, and I know this. But as with, as with all the people on my timeline, on my social media timeline, I I really I really like when people talk about solutions or the reasons behind um, things like racism or sexism or transphobia. I really love when people get in depth and talk about, like, well, what is the cause of all this? Where does this come from? What can we do? What's the road forward with all of this, this horribleness that humans do to each other? That really is like my, um, because for me, even and with climate change as well, when people go, here it is, it's really bad, I go like, yeah, that's really bad. And there's no conversation really to have around that. Like, yeah, it's terrible, sucks, people suck, human beings suck. We're all really pathetically flawed. And uh so but my just my natural inclination is to go with, like, okay, now that we know that we suck, how is it we're going to go forward and get better? Like, what's the real path forward? That just always intrigues me and interests me, and that's why I have discussions about what do we do if, what's the, maybe, possibly, I don't know. That's just me. Doesn't have to be you, but that's why we're all here discussing this. And I'm glad that you're all here discussing this. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you'd like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. I'm getting all your t-shirt orders. Thank you. Keep them coming. I'm going to keep taking them for the rest of the week. Until next time, peace.